Hey, welcome back to the Midday Q&A. I'm your host, the Duckman. We're back today discussing fuel pumps. That's right, fuel pumps. Electric versus mechanical fuel pumps on an old air-cooled Volkswagen Beetle. Or any air-cooled Volkswagen for that matter. Why do I prefer the electric ones over mechanical? And that's actually been a pretty big debate since I demonstrated Eleanor's engine here running with an electric fuel pump. Now I also use the same electric fuel pump on Ruby right over here. So we're going to discuss a little bit of the pros and cons of electric versus mechanical fuel pumps, and I hope it answers some of the questions you guys have been asking, and what I think is better, and maybe you'll agree, maybe you'll disagree, but whatever route you go down, just choose whatever's best for you. So as always, like, comment, subscribe, pluck the dingle belly down there next to the subscribe button, and we get updates every time I upload a new video. Don't forget to check out Duckman Cycles and VW Garage up on the Facebook group page. Check out my Instagram, VV, and if you'd like to email me, duckmancycles@duckshit.net. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll be back in just a minute. Now right here on Eleanor's engine, when I started putting this thing together, you noticed immediately I was using an electric fuel pump on it. The mechanical one is really something that's tried and true. The Volkswagen had been running on these things, you know, since the beginning, since the very, very beginning. I don't believe they ever put an electric fuel pump on a Beetle except for fuel-injected Beetles, and I put that block-off plate that you see in the mechanical fuel pump's place. That covers that off so that way I can eliminate the pump altogether. And one of the reasons I do that is because I like the extra room inside the engine compartment. It makes it a lot easier to work around this area. It's a whole lot easier to get to my carburetor bolts. It's a whole lot easier to work on the distributor. There's just more availability of space. So that's my number one reason why I do that. The number two reason is I like to be able to flip a switch on the dashboard, click, and turn the fuel pump on at will. And if in the event that, let's say you ran your tank dry, just ran it out of fuel for some reason, it takes sometimes a long time, and very often a full tank of gas, in order for the fuel to get from the front of the car all the way through that tunnel, up through the fuel line, and that's the trick. It has to come from the fuel tank back up to the fuel pump, which then it'll feed it into the carburetor. But often it gets into well, essentially it's a vapor lock situation where there's air in the fuel line and it's having trouble drawing that air out to replace it with fuel that's coming in behind it. So sometimes you got to turn that key and you got to crank that Beetle. I mean, just crank the living crap out of it until finally it manages to get some gas and fire it up. Sometimes what I do is I pour a little gas down in the carburetor to eliminate that situation. If you've got some gas in the carburetor, the thing will fire immediately, and then when you get the RPMs up, that helps to suck that gas through the system. But that's one of those things it's annoying, you know. Okay, you could say, well, don't run out of gas and you won't have that problem. Well, that's very, very true. If you don't run out of gas, you won't have that problem. But if you ever run out of gas, even just one time, you're going to discover exactly what I'm talking about and how it's a pain in the ass. And you're not going to want to deal with that. The other reason is, in the event there is some type of a fuel leak or something, I can always just flip the switch and turn it off. It's real simple as that. While the engine is running, let's say there's a fire going on or something, I can flip that switch and shut it off. Of course, you can always just shut the Beetle off, and once it stops running for whatever reason, then of course the pump will stop turning. But what happens if for some reason it's dieseling and running on while it's burning and you can't shut the fuel supply off? The thing continues to do that. And ask me how I know this, because I've actually, you know, this actually happened to my dad. The car continued to run, the mechanical pump continued to pump, he turned that thing off and that thing was spraying gas around everywhere and that thing continued to run. He could not get it to stop. And as a result, he ended up losing the Beetle over it. Kind of a funny story, because there was actually a woman came running out of the front door of her house with a bucket of water. Where the bucket of water came from, he really doesn't know. She just came on running out, and when she threw the bucket of water, she swung it too far, swung past the car, and splashed it all over my dad, and got almost none of it on the car. But a little bit that did get on the car managed to get the fire to go out, or at least dulled it down enough that it wasn't a big deal. But the plastic from the, and this is funny, the plastic from the license plate light, which is of course above the engine on the deck lid, dripped through the little hole because it was burning, and that flaming piece of plastic dripped down onto the engine, and the engine reignited yet again. And there was no way she could fill up the second bucket of water that fast. How she even had the first bucket, I don't know, mopping the floor or something with it. But anyway, my dad lost the car, and it just wouldn't stop running when that happened. It actually continued to diesel on. It was running on, spraying all over that engine. It was just, yeah, it was a total disaster, and he lost the car as a result. Electric fuel pumps do cost you a little bit more. I mean, admittedly they do. But when my friends tell me, well, hey, I got a fuel pump for less than $20, the first thing I ask them is, what did you get? Did you get a cheap Chinese pump? One that you're probably going to find yourself replacing again maybe next year? One of these cheap Chinese pumps? Or did you get yourself a good German mechanical one that you can rebuild? These German mechanical original pumps are really nice because you can actually replace the diaphragm in them and put it back together, and it's a brand new pump once again. And these aren't cheap. These will cost you some money. I had to go back to re-record a section and edit this video because of a very important factor that was reminded to me by one of my Patreons over there on duckshit.net. If you haven't hit up duckshit.net to become a Patreon, you might want to. This important piece of information came from Joseph Moe, JD Moe. He's been with me on YouTube for quite a while. Thank you very much for reminding me of this. I mean, this little detail is so important as to the reason why you wouldn't want to use one of these is because there's actually a diaphragm down inside of here. And the diaphragm gets pushed up and down on by a push rod. And what happens if that diaphragm leaks, or worse yet, ruptures entirely, the fuel drains out through the bottom of the fuel pump and down into the engine block. So you'll be running along and you don't even know how bad it's leaking, just going along minding your own business, and all that gasoline is dripping down into your oil, thus killing the viscosity of it when it breaks it down. It becomes not much better at lubricating than water, and what happens is your main bearings go. All your crank bearings, all your rod bearings, it's just, yeah. You're gonna score the cylinders, you're gonna mess up your valve guides, you're gonna have problems. That's one of the reasons why I don't like running these, and I completely forgot about that because it never happened to me. That's the reason why, but I mean, I've read it many times. It's actually been covered in many books that I've read. But yes, these guys can and are known to leak gasoline right out the bottom of them and down into your engine case. So there's another reason why you wouldn't run a mechanical pump. And then, of course, you have the option for a cheap electric fuel pump. This is one of the Mr. Gasket ones. I think these things will run you about $15. You make sure you get the right PSI. You need no more than 4. Anything you go over 4, you might have a problem on carburetors anyway. Remember, everything we're talking about today is carburetor related. This is a fuel filter that's attached on here. So this, you can actually ignore that. It's just essentially extending it just because it's a filter that's in line. Now, what I use is actually a Carter fuel pump. This is the Carter fuel pump. This is a filter that it comes with, but it's a nice electric motor driven pump. It's actually, you hear the motor turning inside of it, as opposed to this, which is a diaphragm style. You hear pop, 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 pop. And I've seen so many of these, by the way, die right out of the package. They build up fuel pressure, and then that's it. They won't pump anymore. And once that pressure goes down, they just don't work. And we had 3 of them go bad, all in the same day, back to back, one after the next, over at Tech Session one day. So these are crap. I would stay away from those. Just yeah. I mean, you might get a good one, but we had 3 go bad, all brand new out of the package. So I run with a Carter here, and I don't remember what the part number is, but I'll make sure that I put it down in the video description. These go as low as about $30. They're really nice. They come with a fuel filter attached to it. The downside is you do have to run a wire to it, but that's really not a big deal. Just come right off of your fuse box to a switch, and then through that switch, go right to the electric motor. I mean, it's just one wire here, and the other wire, of course, goes to ground. Simple as that. Run it in line. Hook this up underneath your gas tank. Don't put it in the engine compartment. Don't put it close to the engine compartment. If you build up pressure from underneath your gas tank, that way it'll pressurize the entire system through the tunnel all the way up to the engine. Now, if you're concerned about stock look, and you really want to have that stock fuel pump in its location here, even if it's a bad pump, so long as it doesn't leak, you can actually run your pressurized line from your electric into that and then back up to your carburetor so it looks stock. So if you're concerned with that, that's a way to pre-prime your mechanical system. And as I said, whether your mechanical works or not, usually the pressure is enough to feed right through that pump and make it function just the same. Now, I'm very happy with this Carter electric fuel pump, and I've run this on all of my Volkswagens over the years. Being that they're not in the engine compartment, usually you don't have to get too dirty to replace them. You actually work on the cold end of the car, you know, where the gas tank is. You don't have to deal with the heat or the sludge that gets all over everything when you're working in the engine compartment. It's also much easier to replace because the bolts, essentially, there's only actually one screw that holds these things on, because there's a belt that goes around it with a screw that goes through and attaches it to the chassis. They're not noisy. You will hear them. So you know if something's gone wrong. If you turn your fuel pump on and you don't hear it running, something is obviously wrong. But all in all, I've been really happy with these things, so let me show you how I have it installed up on the Fastback. Alright, this is Ruby, my 1968 Volkswagen Fastback. She used to be fuel injected, so she did have a 30 psi pump on there. The 30 psi pump was not replaced by a previous owner when he downgraded to carburetors. So, needless to say, the Delorto carburetors that run here were just pissing fuel out of everywhere until I realized that it had the wrong fuel pump on it. And I didn't know that until the fuel pump that he had on here, I don't know where it came from or what the deal was on it, but it actually broke into two pieces. It actually busted in the middle, and the fuel from this car drained into my garage, and there was about 3 or 4 gallons of gas in the middle of the garage puddled up, and it damn near killed us in the middle of the night because the fumes from it were terrible and filled up the entire house, so it was absolutely disgusting. But I replaced that fuel pump with a Carter, and I did that years ago, and I've been very happy with it since. And it lives in the trunk area, underneath this replaced panel that's underneath the spare tire, and there it is right there. So my fuel pump lives down in there. It's a little grody. I should probably check the electrical connections on it, but when I put them together, I shrink wrap the electrical connectors on there, and I fill them up with dielectric grease first to stop the electrical connections from corroding. And this thing has been really good to me over the years. The only problem I ever had with it is I think something got up underneath here, a piece of debris or something, and knocked one of the wires loose. And I was on the interstate one day, and the thing started chugging like it was struggling for fuel, and then it stalled. And first thing I thought when I flipped the switch, guess what? I don't hear the fuel pump running. And that was part of the diagnostic that I mentioned before. If you don't hear that fuel pump running, then obviously something is wrong. So I opened up the little hatch that you see in here, got down below, and as soon as I touched the wire, the thing started running again. I put everything back together, got back in the car, and drove away. I wasn't even on the side of the road, but maybe 60 seconds. Easy to diagnose, as are most things Volkswagen. It's mounted right there in the axle beam. On the case of the Beetle, I'll mount it underneath the fuel tank. It'll be a little bit harder to get to than inside of here. But in Eleanor's trunk, up inside of Eleanor's trunk here, there's the steering box access hole right here. And this is where you would adjust your steering box. On the opposite side, this is for right-hand drive vehicles. There's another hole. And right in here is where I will probably install my fuel pump, where I can easily get to the fuel pump right here just by opening the hood. Yeah, it's convenience factor, you know, 101. Real easy to get to. All I have to do is use a flathead screw, pop the screw out of there, pull the cover off, and there will be the pump. I can make my connections, disconnections, electrical connections, the whole works right there. So, you know, big benefit to electrical fuel pump. As far as I'm concerned anyway, like I said, it's really easy to get to, and I don't have to work in the engine compartment to get to it. All the bolts and everything are really easy to reach. I think that about nails it and covers it, you know, all the different things that I could think of to describe why I prefer electric fuel pumps. But when it comes down to it, you know, what type of fuel pump you choose is ultimately your preference, and it's my preference in this case to use electric. I've been really happy with these things over the years. They're really easy to replace, and they do, like I said, cost me a little bit more than the Chinese replacement pumps, but I've never had to replace one. They've been really good to me, and I've been buying a good name brand one, not that, you know, crap Chinese-made Mr. Gasket crap. That Carter fuel pump actually says made in USA on it, so whatever that's worth, it's actually been pretty good. Prices on them do vary. I've seen them anywhere between $30 to $80, and $80 is just way too much for one of those. I will post some links down below in the video description where you can get one of those. They do go in and out of stock all the time, and the price fluctuates on them dramatically. If you can get one, I suggest buying one when they drop down to less than 40 bucks. If you can get them for 30 like I did, buy more than one. It's always good to have a spare one anyway. I keep it in my spare supply of tools. I usually keep one under the back seat of Ruby, but currently the spare is actually on Eleanor right now. And it will be there temporarily until I'm able to buy some more inexpensive ones. Why is there fuel all over the floor? Oh, it was in the fuel line. You got a little bit of a leak. That piece of fuel line that I was using on Eleanor before, I dropped it on the ground there and it leaked a bit. Noisy car. Different noisy car. That's a Dodge. So anyways, thanks for watching, you guys. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget to give me that likey. Don't forget to subscribe, plug that dingle belly to get updates every time that I upload a new video. Don't forget to check out Duckman Cycles VW Garage up on a Facebook group page. If you'd like to email me, duckmancycles@duckshit.net. Check out my Instagram, VV, same as this YouTube page you are watching this video on. Thanks so much again. Really do appreciate it. We'll see you next time. Now right here on Eleanor's engine, I started using an electric fuel pump when... crap.